What is going on, everybody? My name is Ciara Lawler. Welcome back to a very special episode of Hero or Zero. This is the Heroes for Hire podcast. We are back again talking one comic book character, as we do every single week. We talk to good points and their bad points, and we generally just give you a bit of a rundown of everything to do with that character. Now, I am normally, as always, joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Shaun, but Shaun is still away this week. So what I've decided to do, on Monday we did a bit of a Q&A. Thankfully he will be back for next Monday's episode, thank God. But because I have free reign here this week, I kind of just get to do whatever I want. I can now talk about characters I actually like, because I don't want to discuss stuff with him. And very, very early listeners of the show will remember the fact that my very first Hero or Zero, I'm pretty sure it's episode 2 of Hero or Zero, I covered a little character known as Tim Drake, who is the third Robin. Now, what I decided to do this week was, instead of covering a character that maybe we haven't covered, because I kind of like to have Shaun's reaction where he's shocked at what I'm revealing. Maybe not shocked, you know what I mean, but he's learning along with you. And I like to have that chat of introducing new characters with him. I thought it might be fun because, as I said, episode 1 basically of Hero or Zero was Tim Drake, and since then I don't know if it's bragging to say that we have more listeners now than we did then, because then I think it was just both of our mothers tuned into that episode. It was a good one. They really enjoyed it. I got at least 2 stars on iTunes for both of them. But what I decided to do this week was maybe have a bit of an update, maybe reintroduce Tim Drake, because it's a character I absolutely adore, and I just feel like it might be fun this week. We just have a one-off where you can kind of be led into why I like this character, because there's a whole host of reasons. And more importantly, it's not just because he's a Robin. I know everyone just assumes I like Batman, so I mean Robin. Dick Grayson is my favourite comic book character. I feel like you're seeing a trend. But second up, Tim Drake is my second favourite comic book character. And to be honest, there was a while there where Dick Grayson is my favourite character because he was kind of the first. When I was growing up, I was like, that guy is really cool. Whereas Tim Drake, I'd say if I looked at it objectively, he would be my favourite character. I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility to say that Tim Drake is the best Robin. Now, that's not to say he's my favourite Robin, but I think he's the best Robin. Just on paper, you put everything down, there's been a whole host of Robins. He's been the best one. Because, a lot of people will point to, obviously, Dick Grayson. He's the first. But I see him as Nightwing. I think he's better as Nightwing. Jason Todd, we all know. Tim Drake came as the third Robin. And I feel like he came in August 1989. So I just felt like this week we could have a bit of a chat. Why I like this character. What makes him stand out. Why do people like him? Now, there is a bit of thing that he might be a bit underrated, but let's see where it goes. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm not normally here by myself, but you can go to our website right now, heroesforhire.ie, and you can find every single other episode we've ever done. Now, we are on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff, but if you want an easy to find search engine, I should say. You could literally search for the very first episode of Tim Drake on there and you will find it. I will preface this by saying the audio might be lesser in quality. I think if a podcast starts and their audio is perfect on episode 1 or 2, I'm suspicious of it. What were they up to? They definitely have 57 example episodes before they threw the first one out. We were not that smart. We just started doing them and then we learned on the job. So yeah, we will be discussing Tim Drake. I'll just kind of go through some of his stories, what kind of stands out to me. Tim Drake is really interesting as a Robin, just due to the fact that he's literally, I would say, the most successful Robin commercially as a comic book character. That is because he had his own individual storyline or series So you had, like you said, the Batman and Robin stories. You have Detective Comics. They're all releasing. But Tim Drake was the first Robin to just have a comic book called Robin. And that ran from, I think, 1993 to like 2009, just before the New 52. And in '09, then he became Red Robin. So you can actually see, like, that's a hugely popular character. And it's interesting because we all know Jason Todd just died. Like, the fans voted for him to die. That's how popular he was. Because it's always very hard following Dick Drake. Dick Grayson. But what Tim had very quickly was they introduced him in a story, and Dick Grayson, the first Robin, accepted him immediately. And that really helped readers. Because, of course, you see one of their other Robins immediately accepted. You're like, okay, let's hear him out. This is even before Batman came on the scene. Because, weirdly, it was more important that Dick Grayson liked them rather than Bruce liked them. Because it's Robin. It's not Batman. So it's like... And Dick Grayson is like a loved character in his own right. So people are always going to support him. But yeah, like, I mean, that comic book run, I think it's like 100 and... I don't have the exact number, like 180 issues, something like that, over all those years. Someone do the maths. And what I love about Tim Drake is they call him Timothy Drake. A lot of things I was reading, but it's Tim Drake. They introduced his origin to kind of weave in with Dick Grayson and with Jason Todd just along the way. And I think it's great because it really shows... like, he's been living in this world. It kind of makes the world better just because of this origin once you find out. So Tim Drake, he's the son of Jack and Janet Drake, and he's raised just as a normal child. Like, he's just absolutely fine. No trauma, no issues. None of his parents have been killed to lead him to have a vow of vengeance. It's more just he just likes living his normal kid life. Like, it's nothing big. And so one day he gets taken to the circus, Haley Circus, if I was ever heard of that. And a tragic thing happens. He meets Dick Grayson's parents. That's not the tragic thing. I just want to make that clear. I'm assuming they're nice. I don't know. They're fictional. But he meets the Flying Graysons. They all have like a photo shoot. And it's all lovely. This is, of course, the night where Dick Grayson's parents fall to their death as Tony Zuko cuts the wire, and they die. So Tim is in the audience when that happens. And I don't know if it's exactly said what age he is, but I would assume maybe 4 or 5 around then. And so he's a very traumatic thing, obviously, to see. But it's not until years later that comes into play. Because when he's at the circus that night, the big push is that Dick Grayson can do this amazing gymnastic. I think it's a quadruple somersault or some shit. I'm not quite sure. I'm not a gymnast myself. But the point is Dick Grayson can do this one move. And he's the only person in the whole world that can do it. So Tim Drake is 9 years old. He's at home and he's just watching the news. Well, I'm assuming he's not watching the news. Nobody watches the news at 9, I hope. Go outside. But the news is on the background. His parents are watching it. And he just happens to look up and it's like a video of Batman and Robin apprehending Penguin. And he just kind of looks up and he sees the Robin, the kid on the screen, do the quadruple somersault. And in his head... he puts it together and he starts becoming suspicious because it's immediately put together that, like, well, Dick Grayson's the only person to do this, and there's that guy looks suspiciously like Dick Grayson, the child, and he's with Batman. And then he does a bit more research and he finds, using like his deductive abilities, which we will definitely get into, but he pieces together the truth behind Batman and Robin's identities and basically solves it himself. Now, I want to remind you, he's 9 at this point. So he knows from the age of 9 who Batman and Robin are. He finds out Bruce Wayne has adopted Dick Grayson. I mean, makes sense. Okay, well, if he's adopted Dick Grayson, Bruce Wayne must be Batman, unless Alfred is Batman, and Dick Grayson must be Robin. So to him, that kind of shows the level of detective or like his intelligence from the very start. It's it's right up there with Bruce. And so he watches as he sees Dick Grayson age up, and then Robin goes away for a while. And he notices this. Like, he's constantly watching the news, constantly reading reports of Batman and Robin sightings. And he notices Robin disappears. And then a few months later, a Nightwing character appears. And once again, he figures it out. Okay, well, that must be Dick Grayson. He got too old. He became that hero. And then he sees a new Robin come in, and it's Jason Todd. And so he follows that story for a while. Then, of course, Jason, he does the old stop breathing. And that really hinders him living. And so a crowbar gets involved. It's a whole thing. But basically, Jason, he's not having a great day. And Tim notices this again, because he notices, okay, there's no Robin. Now, he doesn't know he's dead. He's just like, oh, well, the second Robin has disappeared. Maybe he might reappear in a few months as somebody else again. But the Robin never reappears. And Tim's like, that's weird. Like, that's really strange. So he then does a bit more research and all that stuff and finds out that Bruce Wayne, well, Batman, is getting more and more vicious. He's getting more violent. Every single time there's a story comes out, he's getting darker. And he realizes that Batman needs a Robin. And that is Tim's whole driving force. And that's why it's so good. He doesn't see himself as Robin. I want to make that clear. He thinks Batman needs a Robin. And so what he does is he goes on a quest to basically reunite Batman and Nightwing. Because he's like, okay, well, Batman is clearly darker. He's sadder. He's grieving. We need to put him with a Robin so Robin can help him out. The dynamic duo, bring back the basics, all that stuff. So he actually tracks down Dick Grayson and tries to convince him to come back as Robin. So that kind of shows Tim's selflessness, that he never even thinks of himself. He's just like, well, Dick, you can go back as the Robin, can't you? And obviously Dick Grayson's like, I don't want to go back as Robin. I'm Nightwing now. I don't want to go backwards. You don't want to go back to an old job. You know what I mean? I really left it on quite bad terms. So Dick's like, I don't want to get involved. But Tim's like, he needs a Robin. Like, he really, really needs one. And so he comes into the cave, and because Dick Grayson's so impressed that this 13-year-old, I think at this point, has just found out all the information. He's known since 9, and he's never told anyone, and it's just between him, and he just is such a big fan that that's all he wants to do. And so Dick Grayson brings him down to the cave, and is just like, okay, why don't you become the new Robin? And Tim's like, me? I can't be the Robin. And what happens then is Batman and Nightwing, they go to fight Two-Face, or whatever in the story. They get captured. They get trapped. You can see where this is going. Tim dons the Robin costume, and Alfred really helps him out with this, and he actually turns up and manages to rescue them. And impressed, Batman accepted him as the new Robin on a trial basis. And what's really interesting about Tim Drake, and they changed this in the New 52, is that he has no physical attributes whatsoever, really, in terms of athleticism. He's not an athlete. So if Dick Grayson is the perfect athlete, he's the perfect just fighter, just in terms of flips. Jason Todd, he's a brawler. He's all strength. He's just going to go through people. Tim Drake has none of those talents. He can't fight. He's never good in sports. He never did anything like that. But he's the smartest. And so Batman's like, I can train you to fight, but I can't, obviously. It's better if you start off just as a pure detective. And that's what makes him stand out. And so, yeah, he has no physical abilities in terms of fighting. And this is seen, actually, as Tim trains for several months. First with Alfred. He only trains with Alfred at the start. Then he moves up to Batman. And then he moves finally when Batman's like, okay, after several months more, you're finally starting to get this. He moves on to Nightwing. And Nightwing is the last one, which I just think is nice that Nightwing is the last one to train. You would think Batman would be the last one to train Robin, but Batman's like, look, Nightwing, you know more about this than I do. You're the main boss where we're training this kid. And so they trained him, and the first thing Batman tells them is that if they ever see a known killer, because of course Batman's still a bit iffy on the whole Robin thing, if they ever see a known killer, no matter how good you think you are at fighting, his job is to run away and go get help. That's like safe as the Joker. Like, I'm assuming it's mostly just to do with the Joker, but like, if there's any known killers, if you see that, Tim, we're under stress, go get help, go get Nightwing, because I don't want another Robin dying. Which is actually a very emotionally intelligent and mature option by Batman. You don't often see it. You really don't often see it now. Mostly he's just like, let's send the kids to death. But he's like, no, you go away. If something like that happens. And he's completely unique from the previous two. What actually happens in between this is his mother is killed by a criminal. The Obeah man poisons her, and his father is left paralyzed. So this kind of starts the Tim Drake. His parents start slowly dying off, which the other two, Nightwing and Batman, they had that solved immediately. Tim is different because he comes in with two parents completely alive, and they have to figure out a way to get rid of them throughout the story. So yeah, he starts as Robin, and he's basically the new boy wonder that everybody loves him. And he's still not confident though. He doesn't believe in himself, and so Bruce sends him overseas on a tour to Paris. And while he's over there, he runs into some thugs that were working for King Snake. And King Snake is being followed by a lady called Lady Shiva, who we have covered in Hero Zero. But Lady Shiva, to put it bluntly, is the best fighter in DC. Lady Shiva has trained Batman. She's trained everyone. And if you can beat Lady Shiva, you're just like amazing, because she is considered the best fighter, just hand to hand. And so he heads over there. Lady Shiva is training him. So you can see where that like improves him immediately. They fall out. But what's actually really interesting about his training with Lady Shiva in Paris is that she also offers to teach him how to use only one weapon of his choice. Tim chose the bow staff because it was the least deadliest weapon that she owned, but also gave him his iconic bow staff look, which is just, I mean, it's just cool. It's just a cool weapon to have as a Robin. So yeah, Tim has the bow staff that he uses. And that was trained by Lady Shiva. They kind of fall out at one stage where the villain is like hanging on, they defeat the villain, and Lady Shiva's like, okay, kill him. And Tim is like, I'm not going to kill him. And then they fall out because, of course, Lady Shiva's like, well, why don't we just kill everyone? That'll just solve it. And Tim he's been trained by Batman, so he's like, we're not going to kill anyone. Why don't we not do that? But yeah, and so when Tim starts as Robin, everything's going well. I mean, Bruce is Batman, he's Robin. It's fucking fantastic. A great story about Tim is the story of Nightfall. And I feel like we've kind of covered a little bit. It's when Bane releases all of the Arkham Asylum inmates, and one by one, Batman and Robin have to kind of go around trying to put them all back into jail. And the idea is that Bane is going to wait until Bruce is just out of energy. He's just ruined after 5 days of not sleeping, just constantly staying up, capturing the next criminal, moves on to the next one, captures that criminal, moves on to the next one. So Tim and Bruce are basically working triple overtime at the minute, just putting away all these criminals. And within this, Bane breaks out of Arkham Asylum, as he was wont to do, and Bane is just waiting. He's just waiting until they're exhausted. And in Batman's climatic battle, finally confronting Bane, Robin and Azrael, Azrael now will come in, John Paul Valley, who is he's another sidekick that Batman took on amongst this time, because obviously Batman, he's running on fumes, and him and Robin can't do it all. So Azrael is like this amazing fighter that's going around Gotham, and he seems nice. So Bruce is like, you're now my other new sidekick. So now he has Robin and Azrael as his two sidekicks that he's training at the same time, and they're just helping him put away all these criminals. Robin and Azrael are summoned to aid in the fight against Bane, but they arrive too late. And when they get to Batman's location, Bane has broken his spine, which I feel like means that he won. If we're going to go by levels, you kick him in the shin, maybe 1 point. Spine break, it's like catching the snitch in Quidditch, surely. Is that like just a winning of the game? So Batman I think medically, no, I'm no doctor, but I would say he's fucked, if I wanted to put a medical term on it. So, obviously, Batman's out of the equation. Bane's broken his spine. You've still got Tim and Azrael. And Bruce recovers from his consciousness and is just like, Azrael needs to become Batman. And you need to look after him as Robin because Gotham is in need of Batman. And Tim's like, that's a great idea. Jean-Paul Valley, he's been nothing but sound. He's been up. He's been absolutely great ever since I started to know him. So Tim's like, that's a great idea, boss. I'll trade him in. So Azrael starts as Batman. And very quickly, Tim notices that Jean-Paul is losing his mind as the responsibility and power goes to his head. There's moments where, Azrael is just beating the absolute shit out of criminals, but he just never stops. Tim tries to reason with him multiple times, but Jean-Paul is just like, look, you're just a kid. Fuck off. And so he gets rid of Tim, and he's like, I don't need to work with you. I'm Batman. Don't talk to me. And so Jean-Paul actually defeats Bane, which is a pretty cool idea that Azrael he's the only one that can do it at the moment. Obviously Bruce still on the couch. Tim has been forced out. Azrael actually defeats Bane. He spares Bane's life, which is like a moment of, oh, maybe he's back. But then very quickly, Jean-Paul's like, I don't want you as my Robin. I don't want the sidekick. And he blocks every entrance to the Batcave, basically telling Tim, fuck off, I don't need you. And then when Tim does sneaks in through one of an entrance that Azrael doesn't know about, Azrael proceeds to kick the ever-living shit out of him to the point of nearly death. He beats up this boy. And I think Tim at this point is maybe 14, 15, and Azrael trained killer, so he's just beating the shit out of the kid. Obviously not great. So Tim gets out of there, and he gets out of there, and he's like, he goes to tell Nightwing, he's like, this is messed up. And while this is happening, he also runs into the daughter of a very small criminal known as Cluemaster, whose daughter is Stephanie Brown, who I will cover on a Hero Zero with Shaun. But Stephanie Brown is spoiler in Gotham, but she's also she's also been, I think, the third Batgirl, maybe the fourth Batgirl. But yeah, she's part of the Bat family and all that stuff. But Stephanie Brown and Tim Drake are normally like a 1-2 punch in comic books. They're normally in a romantic relationship. They would be the same to me as like Barbara Gordon, Dick Grayson. Like it's just the couple you think of. So to me, so he meets Stephanie Brown, and this is kind of like what starts his like own storylines in his own comic book, because obviously, like, if you're 15 or 16, you want to read about Robin who's going around solving crimes, and he's got like a romantic love interest. So that's why they brought out that comic book issue for like people in their teens and stuff, and that was big at the time. At the same time though, Azrael's still going around. There's also a moment where Abattoir, I think is the name of the villain, he's hanging off a rooftop, and Tim's like trying to get there to like help him, and Azrael just lets him fall to his death. It's just like, I think is it molten metal or something? I think he falls into like a vat of molten metal. So it's one of those where Tim's like, you could have saved him. Azrael's I tried my best, lad. Honestly, he slipped. He really ran quick, but like really in like slow motion. Like, I'm coming. No, just hang on for another 10 minutes. I'll get there. So at this point, Tim informs Bruce as well, because Bruce obviously has been out of the equation, hasn't been even around, so he doesn't know any of this. And he tells him all about Jean-Paul's actions and the bastardization of the mantle, basically, is what they describe it as. And Bruce vows to fight Jean-Paul for the mantle of the Bat after an intensive training and a process to heal his broken back. So Bruce goes off to train with Lady Shiva to heal his broken back. And at the same time, Robin and Nightwing are asked to basically just look after him. Just like keep an eye on him, make sure he doesn't do anything fucking mad. Bruce then comes back, and him and Jean-Paul have a fight, and he actually wins, and he takes back the mantle, and the dynamic duo are back. But it's a really great storyline that shows like Tim, like Bruce is taken out of the picture, and Tim is the one that we have to trust, because Azrael is not trustworthy as Batman, so we just have to rely on Tim as like the center of good, or just like the conscious in the comic book, which is I just really like. There's also a small moment where Dick Grayson takes over as Batman here, and Tim is actually his Robin, and they're like a really perfect duo. But that doesn't last very long. Batman is like, yeah, my spine's grand now. I'm coming back. I'm making my grand return. So yeah, another story that I like is Tim in No Man's Land. His whole family move out. His dad hates the fact that he's never home, and he doesn't understand. His dad doesn't know that Tim is Robin. So his father moves him over to the Flash's city and is like, you're not going back to Gotham. And then No Man's Land happens, the comic storyline No Man's Land, where basically the whole city is just being attacked from everywhere. It's just considered a no man's land by the government. It's just left to its own devices. And obviously Tim is like, he sneaks back out to get back to the city, and then while he's there, his father rings him, and he has to pretend that he's been like trapped in Gotham accidentally. And I think Jack Drake, who's his dad, he rings like the government, and they get a plane and they get like Tim out. But Tim has to pretend like he's just a child, even though he's been running around as Robin for like 2 weeks trying to fight all the criminals in Gotham. Tim is also very big in Young Justice, which is pretty cool. He's one of the founding members of Young Justice in the comic books, and he's also the leader of the Young Justice. For a short period, that also happened coincided with the storyline Doom, when Batman reveals that he has like plans to take out and kill all the Justice League members at any given moment. So you can see why then the Young Justice team are kind of looking at Robin going, this motherfucker also has plans to kill me at certain times, if his dad also has plans to kill my dad. So they kick him out of the group because they just tell him that they just don't trust him. Tim's very mad because he wouldn't do anything like that, because Bruce, once again, not as nice as Tim. Tim has Bruce's brains, but he has like Dick's like sensitivity or like thoughts for other people, which is really important. He's like a perfect mix of the two. And when he comes back, they actually form the Teen Titans, and he joins up with them. So it's one of those just small stories that like he gets blamed basically for Batman being a psychopath, but it's not really his fault. And what ruins his life around this time is also the fact that his father finds out that he's Robin. He comes home with a black eye, and so Tim's father sneaks into his bedroom and finds the Robin suit, and he finds all that stuff, and he finally figures it out. And Jack Drake, he ain't too happy, and so he's like, you gotta quit. You're gonna quit as Robin. And so Tim has to quit because his dad is like, you're not allowed to leave. This puts a strain on his relationship with Stephanie Brown, who they're always together in the comic books mostly, because she, in Tim's absence, volunteers to be the next Robin. So his girlfriend has now basically just taken his job. Bruce accepts her because he's been worked with her before, and he's like, oh, she's pretty good. And Tim vouches for her as well, and they work really well together. So maybe like she could be a good Robin. She's immediately fired because she doesn't follow orders, which, I mean, very Bruce-like. He's like, don't disobey orders. She's like, okay, cool. She does whatever she wants. Then he fires her. But Tim is just living a normal life at this point. That he's just absolutely fine. He's just trying to go back to school, and it's one of those where he like sees all the stuff on TV, and you have that moments where he's just like, oh, I wish I was back. And what actually brings him back is there's a massive gang war that kicks off called War Games in Batman, and the city is basically just plunged into a whole gang war where Tim's dad is like, you don't leave the house. But you can understand where once all the gangs start taking over all the streets, he's like, I gotta go back because, I mean, the city needs me, because Bruce is running on fumes again, and Dick Grayson, Nightwing is there, Bruce is there, and they have Batgirl, but there's like 3 of them, so even I can offer a little bit of help. So that kind of brings him back into the fold, and that's actually how he becomes Robin again, and he comes back. Within this story though, it's actually revealed that Stephanie dies in this storyline. So he comes back as Robin, he gets his dream back that he just wants to be Robin, and then his girlfriend passes away. And it's really heartbreaking. Now, between you and me, this is a death in comic books, so you can understand what's going to happen probably in about 5 to 6 years when they need a comic book cover. And we're all fairly agreed on what's about to occur. But at this point, very emotional time for old Tim, because, I mean, girlfriend dead, he gets his job back, but the city's now just in ruins. And so he's just like, okay, I'm just going to try and be the best Robin I can be. There's a really small story along this where there's like, he encounters his future self, I think, like in a possible timeline, and Tim is actually Batman, but he's like brutally paroling the streets, murdering all of Bruce's former rogues gallery with the handgun that killed Thomas and Martha Wayne, which is proper edgy fuck Batman stuff. Like that is edgelord stuff. But I just like that. I think that's the idea of his future self. If everything goes wrong, that's what Tim can become. To me, I've never really seen him as grown up to be like that, but Tim also has that in him. He has anger in him, but he also will be like, he realises that. Not as much as Jason Todd or anything. And so, speaking of Jason Todd, a storyline happens where, of course, Captain Boomerang, just got it very quickly, Captain Boomerang kills Jack Drake. Are we all clear? We all seen that coming. I mean, he actually lasted a lot longer than I felt he should, but he eventually was killed off. Bruce offers to adopt Tim, and this is a really small thing, but Tim actually turns him down on the option at the adoption at the start, and he falsifies records to create an uncle who would become his legal guardian. And he then moved to his Uncle Eddie's house in Bloodhaven. Batman eventually tracks him down and is just like, there's no uncle, is there? And he's like, nah, I lied. And instead of getting mad, Bruce then says, I'm going to teach you how to cover your tracks completely so you don't get caught. So I think Bruce realizes, like, Bruce has spent time with this kid. He realizes this kid is as smart as me. He just needs to be trained. He could actually become smarter than me, which he's actually mentioned in the comic books before. Like, he's a proper detective. Like, he's probably the second best detective on Earth behind Bruce. And so he's just obviously 16. So he needs to be trained in certain aspects. And yeah, so as mentioned, Jason Todd comes back and he's obviously not that happy with, Tim taking over as Robin. So they have a fight and Jason goes to Titan Towers, kicks the shit out of all of them, and he basically just wants to fight Tim, just to find out who's better. And although Tim, he basically fights him to the point of near death because it's in the middle of the night, Jason demands to know if he still believed himself to be as good as people say, to which Tim replied with a defiant yes before Todd knocked him unconscious. Jason spares his life and he kind of shows a grudging sort of respect for Tim after this. Like, he's kind of like, would I have been a better Robin if I had friends like that? But it's one of those where Jason respects him more because like, he just didn't give up. He was just going to keep fighting. Even though he's not as good a fighter as Jason, he's just going to keep fighting. He's also very good friends with Superboy in the comic books, and Superboy actually dies in a storyline. And that's when you will actually see the Robin costume change in the comic books, where he goes to red and black, which is just a very slick suit. Instead of like red and green, it's red and black. And this is in memory of Superboy, whose colours are red and black, of course. So he changes the colours just to match his dead friend, which I just think is a nice, small little story that he does. And the last story I want to cover with Tim, because I could talk about him all day, but I feel like it's weird with just me. I'm just like rambling. This is like me just going, and another thing that I like about Tim. A story I really like about Tim Drake is that Ra's al Ghul actually shows up, because of course Damien Al Ghul shows up in Gotham, so that introduces Ra's, and he comes in, and Damien, by the way, immediately comes in and is like, I'm the new Robin, and Tim's like, no you're not, and Damien's like, do you not know who I am? Because he's Damian Wayne, of course. But Tim gets basically asked by Ra's al Ghul, does he want to take over the League of Assassins? So Tim is asked ahead of everyone else. And that's because, Raish sees Tim as like, he's basically Bruce, but he's a lot younger. And if he can get to him, then he'd have the same thing where he'd have the detective. Because we all know, like, Ra's al Ghul calling Batman detective. Tim has that same thing. So Raish loves that. So he's like, can I get him younger? So he brings him in. And his promise is that Raish promised in return, basically, for Tim coming to his side, he would resurrect Tim's parents with the Lazarus pit and all of his friends. And of course, Tim refuses. And what happens then is there a big fight scene that happens. But afterwards, there's a really great comic book battle where Tim is actually reconsidering the offer that Raish made him. And he turns around and he actually agrees to it. Like, he decides on it. And it's because he weighs it all up and he's like, I'm after, like, causing both my parents to die. I've caused lots of my friends to, like, say Superboy, who died. His idea is that he's willing to give up his life, even though it won't make him happy if it brings all those people back. And I just think that's a really great, like, character motivation for him. And he's actually about to do it. Like, he's about to walk back to Raish and say, yeah, that's a great deal. Like, I want to do that. And Nightwing stops him and basically has to convince him from killing himself to be like, back out a deal. And the two of them are just in tears. And it's a great scene. But it's like, it's one of those moments where you just like, the two of them have always had each other's backs from the very start. And Nightwing's like, no, you don't have to do this. Because they are gone. And whatever comes back won't be them out of that pit. So yeah, that's just some of my favourite Tim Drake stories. I'll go over through his powers and abilities. He obviously has peak human condition, peak human strength, peak human speed, peak human senses, martial arts. He's been trained by Lady Shiva. He was at first not the best fighter. I would say that he still isn't the best fighter out of all of them, but he reminds me more of Bruce Wayne actually, in terms of he can fluidly change between fight styles. Whereas Dick Grayson is always flippy, Jason Todd is always power. I find Tim Drake can more just like fluidly change depending on who he's fighting, which is probably a better sign of a better fighter. He of course is investigation. He's an absolutely genius detective. Batman has suggested that he will one day surpass the world's greatest detective, which is him. So I don't know if he's like talking about himself like that. He has all the computer hacking, he's got computer operations, vehicle combat, multilingual, lockpicking, meditation, indomitable will. I didn't even talk about Raid Robin, didn't even get to that because there's whole stuff to do with that. But yeah, Tim is, I think he's possibly the most well-rounded Robin. Maybe not. Maybe Dick is also there. But like, you have the two of them, but Tim is probably the most like normal one out of all of them. I think that's why people like him, but it's also why probably people underrate him, because there's nothing spectacular. It's just a kid who's really smart and really good at fighting and just like a really good all-rounder. He's just like 8s across the board instead of having a 10 and then a 6. I really like the idea of just Tim coming in, and then also there's actually a moment where I think there's a story DC East, because it's deceased, whatever, where Tim dies. I think it's an alternate universe, and Jason Todd actually writes on the gravestone, he writes the best of us, which, look, if Jason even agrees to it, who are we to admit? But yeah, so or who are we to say anything? So yeah, that is my report on Tim Drake, and I hope you all liked it. If it was a bit rambly, I do apologise. Shaun will be back next week. We can get back to regularly scheduled back and forth. But it's just me rambling about a character I like. If you liked what you heard, you can give us a like and review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. iTunes, Spotify, we're on all that stuff. We also have the website, which is heroesforhire.ie. Our store is up there, all of our contacts, you can support us through the Patreon up there. It's all there, and all the episodes are there as well. But most importantly, just tell one human being that we exist. Just a one, please. So, I've been Ciara Lawler, and we shall see you all next week, guys. Bye!